Hi everyone, this is Jim. I wanted to take a look at another game from the 11th Edmonton International. And today I wanted to focus on a game played by Surya Ganguly. So Surya is an Indian Grandmaster who is invited to this tournament. He's played in it before as well. Surya is a strong Indian Grandmaster who's won the Indian National Championship 6 times. And also he serves as one of Anand's helpers. He was on the team that helped Anand prepare for the World Championship. So Surya in this game has the black pieces, and his opponent is Ian Findlay. Ian Findlay is a Canadian player who recently moved to Banff from Ontario, and he was strongest perhaps back in the 80s when he was one of the top players in Canada. He's a FIDE master, and he qualified for this tournament by playing in a qualifying tournament and scoring well enough to qualify. So he got in on his own merits, and he's looking for a fight in this game, it looks like, because he starts off with e4, and after c5, knight f3, d6, goes for the open Sicilian. So d4, not afraid of the complications of one of these sharp positions. And in fact, Surya goes for the Najdorf with the a6. So all this could have been predicted, I suppose, if Ian had checked out the record of Surya Ganguly, what he normally plays. So Ian goes with bishop g5, the old main line of the Najdorf. And if black responds with pawn to e6, we can get into many classical lines like the poison pawn variation. But Surya Ganguly plays knight bd7, is second choice in this position, but a good solid way for black to play, and also very interesting. White lifts the queen off the back rank, preparing to castle queenside. h6, kicking the bishop. Bishop drops back, and now g6, preparing to develop the bishop to g7. White doesn't castle at this point, but gets on with immediate play against the king side. Very typical of the Najdorf, going for this quick attack. Black responds in the center with e5, and the knight drops back to f3. Taking is also possible there. The queen goes to c7, and now black castles queenside. So immediately bringing a rook to bear on the backwards e-pawn, which is often the backwards d-pawn, which is often the Achilles heel of this Najdorf setup. Black responds with b5. It's not under, it's under pressure, but it's defended at the moment. So b5, preparing to build up on the queen side here and go after white's king. So we have one of these very dynamic games with black has not yet castled yet, but there's going to be attacks on opposite wings. Okay, so white here played g3, which is not in my opening book. The line that I have is knight to d5, knight takes, pawn takes, and this is supposed to be a little bit better for white, so slight edge. It's somewhat it's an okay position for black too, though, in a way, because black has managed to kind of secure the d-pawn in a way by bringing this this pawn forward. The e-pawn is now covering, has moved to the d-file and is now covering the d-file and protecting this pawn from the rook. So this somewhat helps black's position, this exchange. Let's see. Ian plays b3 here, which is kind of a committal move. It locks in this bishop here. Now the bishop is not getting trapped, so but it is that the bishop doesn't have a lot of options anymore. So this is probably a conscious decision made to go into a position where black has the bishop pair, but it looks like white has a lot of activity. He exchanges off the bishop here. Yeah, black attacked the knight, but white has time to exchange off the bishop with an attack on the rook. So so black takes back, and now the knight hops into d5, similar to the other line. We get knight takes d5, pawn takes d5. And so, yeah, it's similar to the position I showed previously, but a little bit of force removed. The bishop is gone, and the knight is gone, and black has the bishop pair. And so that's something to keep in mind. It looks like white is still better here. Even though white has given up the bishop pair, it looks like white has an advantage in development. And his position just looks a little more harmonious somehow. But things change kind of quickly. And watch what happens with the bishops. Let's see. So bishop to g4 was played. Now f takes e5. Taking a pawn out of the center. And also opening up some lines towards the king side here. So very logical. D takes e5. And it gave black a passed pawn, but it also gave white a passed pawn. So both those pawns are potentially dangerous. And now h6. White decides, Ian decides to provoke an exchange here. And so the bishop, the light-squared bishop, is traded for the knight. And now what we have is the only minor pieces left on the board are the two bishops. And they're of opposite color. So black has the dark-squared bishop, and white has the light-squared bishop. And in a middle game, the opposite-colored bishops often lead to a very dynamic middle game play that favor the attacking side. Because the side with the, for example, the side with the dark-squared bishop basically has an extra piece on the dark squares. So if black can arrange a dark-squared attack more quickly than white can arrange a light-squared attack, then that's going to be the source of an advantage. But this position is still balanced. So Ganguly plays queen to d6 here, blocking the pawn. h4 is played. Ian has the idea of pushing the queenside pawns forward, just disrupting the king side over here. Now bishop to g7, putting the bishop on a good diagonal and finally developing the last piece, although he still hasn't castled. And h5, just going forward with this idea of disrupting the pawns. Ganguly pushes on with f5, and now h takes g6 was played. So opening up a line towards the king, and at this point Ganguly decides to castle. So an interesting decision here, but the king in a way is protected by these white pawns. This pawn blunts this diagonal, and this pawn blunts this file. Although you'll see, I mean, black needs to round up those pawns, but black is a pawn down at this point, so black does need to do something about that. But he's taking his time in terms of getting those pawns back. Okay, so Ian plays queen to b3, setting up the queen on this nice-looking diagonal, defending the pawn and preparing to push it forward with the tempo on the king. Ganguly pushes on with e4. King b1 is played, getting off of the dark squares and getting to a slightly safer position. There potentially were ideas along that diagonal, although it's guarded by the pawn here at the moment. Let's see. Rook to f6 was played. I mean, black could have grabbed that pawn, but Ganguly has got a particular idea about how the order in which he wants to grab these pawns. So bishop to h3 is played by Ian. So there's going to be a trade of pawns here. Ganguly gets his pawn back, and Ian grabs this pawn, and then he takes on g3, hitting the queen. So right here is a critical moment. So the queen is under attack, and you've got to do something about it. And queen to c4 seems to be the move that needs to be played here. Other moves lead to trouble, including the move that Ian played here, bishop to e6. A pretty natural-looking move. Just it's a tempo move. You can get that move in with tempo and play queen to c4 on the next move, which is what happens in the game. So let's go through the game, and then we'll come back to that point. So after the check, the king goes to h8, and now queen to c4 is played, getting away from that rook, and black's queen goes to e5 with the threat of mate. So certainly white has to be very careful in this position, but Ian comes up with a pretty clever defense here. He plays rook to d4, and the idea is that white can't take that rook. So if you want to have a little tactical quiz, why don't you see if you can figure out what's wrong with queen takes d4. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. Pause the video if you want time to think about it. After queen takes d4, there's the disruptive move, rook takes h6 check. And the king has no moves, right? The rook is guarding these squares, the bishop is guarding this square. So bishop takes rook is forced, and that undefends the queen. So that turns out okay. This also goes with check, and it looks like white can pick up another pawn. It'll be a queen against 2 rooks, but white has 2 extra pawns. Let's see. Well, you can't be too. I'm sorry. You have to be a little bit careful here. There's also the back rank threat, so you can't just grab the pawn right away. So 1 pawn and a queen against 2 rooks, say. But it turns out to be okay for white. So what Ganguly plays here is king to h7. Pretty natural move. There was actually, though, already a winning move here for black. Kind of amazing, but I just thought I would show it. This is a computer line, so obviously neither player saw this one. But black could win here with e3. So pawn to e3, just threatening to push this pawn forward, and the rook can't come back. Cancel that. The rook can't come back to defend the back rank because it opens up this diagonal. So c3 is pretty much forced. So there's this exchange. B takes c3, and now rook to e4, trying to chase the queen away. There's this great trick here. Rook here check. Rook takes, and queen to h2. And now this is a killer threat. The rook is hanging, and mate is hanging on b2 there. So b takes c3 to get rid of the mate threat. Then the rook can come over with check. And white is just falling apart there. So that move e3 right here in this position, pawn to e3, was a winning move. Anyway, like I said, neither side spotted this, and Surya Ganguly played the natural move king to h7, and d6 was played. So pushing the pawn forward. This was this combination of bishop e6 and d6, I guess, actually finally loses. The move that needed to be played here was c3. But let's see, is this a good time to go back and look at that queen c4 move? Yeah, so let's show how queen c4 deals with some of these threats. So if we back up in this position, instead of bishop e6, that was like the losing move, although there was a second chance. If queen c4 had been played right away, and then we went down a similar line where queen goes to e5, threatening mate, there is this move d6 check. This can be thrown in, chasing the king over to h8, and then the queen can take here on b4 and defend against the mate threat this way. And now this gives up the bishop. That was the problem with this line previously, is you're down a whole piece, but d7 can be played. And so the advanced pawn here is enough compensation for the piece that's missing. Probably black will have to give back a piece to stop that from queening in the long run. Although there's a few moves that black has to continue to hold it off. But this is a position that white needed to go for. So anyway, bishop e6, back to the game. Bishop e6, king h8, queen to c4 now. It's too late. Queen to e5. The thing is, d6 is not coming with check. You know, queen takes b4, I guess, could have been tried here. Yeah, it doesn't work here because of rook to b8. So yeah, it doesn't work there. So anyway, rook to d4 was played with this clever idea of defending tactically. Let's see, king to h7 was played. And now the move that needed to be played here was c3. c3 at this point still kind of holds on. c3, b takes c3, rook takes e4. Grabbing this pawn, hitting the queen at a time when there's no mate threat. So there's just one moment here when there's no mate threat. And this rook to g1 trick doesn't work. So rook to g1 check. You can take it. The queen comes to h2. It is a mate threat, but there's a counterattack here. There's rook takes g7, king takes. and the queen can grab this pawn with check and defend everything, and white is a piece up. So kind of an amazing, complicated sequence there. So at that point, c3 was still defending. So Ian tried d6, similar to what we saw on the other line, trying to get counterplay with the advanced pawn. Queen takes d4. It can be played now, though. There's no longer this tactic. If rook takes on h6, the king can take. So Ian tried bishop f5 check, and of course if the king drops back, then we have this tactic again. We have rook takes with check and then grabbing the queen. But there's a move here that Surya Ganguly spots. Just block the check with the rook. And now after this exchange, rook takes, bishop takes, Ian tried rook to d1, getting behind the pawn and trying to push it forward, but just the bishop drops back to f6, and this square is securely guarded by the dark squared bishop and the rook, and white cannot get enough force on that square to push the pawn through. The best white can do is grab the exchange, and white will still just be down a piece. After bishop takes rook, king takes rook, king takes bishop, then black has an extra bishop. So Ian resigned at this point. But anyway, pretty fascinating and complicated game there, and it just shows what happens. You can play well throughout 90% of the game, but at some point, the tactics explode, and the grandmaster finds those ways through the complications. Anyway, hope you guys like this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.